Audio. Okay, good morning. So for anyone watching this, I am Christina Miles, and I am sitting here with Kerry, a grad student. She's a PhD candidate in molecular biology and biophysics, if I'm correct, right? That department?
Yeah, so it's kind of confusing because our department name is molecular biology and biophysics, but my area of concentration is molecular biology and biochemistry.
Oh, yeah, that
Yeah,
is
so,
pretty.
yeah, it's quite strange the way it's planned out, but it's our department's kind of just miscellaneous. So I'm in a structural biology lab, so I do a little bit of biophysics and a little bit of biochemistry.
Okay, you could
Mhm.
share a little about that so we can hear what your scientific background is.
So I came to UConn in 2017. And the reason I came to UConn was actually because of the umbrella program, because I wanted to try out new things. Before that, I was a cell and molecular biologist. So pretty much before I just did Western blots and qPCRs.
Wow.
And I tried out structural biology and I liked it just mainly because I like proteins. I'm much more of a protein gal than I am like a geneticist type person. So I study translation synthesis, which is a cell's ability to copy over DNA damage. And it's a kind of interesting pathway because it's heavily implicated in chemoresistance. Because since it can ignore DNA damage, a lot of chemotherapies kill cancer cells through DNA damage. So I study translation synthesis in two capacities. One of them is we actually are trying to make inhibitors to block translation synthesis. And the other one is I just study how the complexes come together within the cell to do its job.
Wow. Okay. There's definitely a lot of potential there. That's a really good area to be in. That's exciting. So,
Yeah, and it's like an up-and-coming field. It's kind of interesting.
yeah, that's awesome. I see a lot of biotech getting into that very soon on the
Right.
other end. Yeah, that's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to thank Kerry for being here today. We are discussing scientific communication, commonly referred to as Scicomm. And just for those who aren't familiar, Scicomm is basically a field, an emerging, fairly new field in science that just seeks to make scientific topics more accessible to the public by tailoring complex scientific topics like genetics and cancer cells and cell damage into just simple terms that are more tailored to a general audience, no jargon, and that is absolutely no easy task. A genetic experiment doesn't seem like it would leave a lot of room for anything else, but scientific communication seeks to make that process so much easier. And Kerry here seems to be an emerging expert in that because she has an amazing platform called BoldedScience. So I'm going to let her tag in with that, but a little bit about it is just that it's a collaborative blog that gives scientists of all career stages a voice. She has over 1,800 followers on Twitter and an amazing website that I will absolutely plug at the end of this. But Kerry, tell us a little bit about BoldedScience.
Okay, so like you said, BoldedScience is a collaborative blog. We post a blog once a week, and I might be a writer or anyone else in the scientific community who wants to participate can write for us too. So actually, we are from UConn. I've had a few students from UConn write for BoldedScience, Nick Giannetti, Ani, and Lee. The three of them have all worked for me, but actually the majority of the guest authors that we've had on our blog, I've actually found through Twitter. So the reason why I decided to start BoldedScience was because I realized that I needed more opportunities to practice my writing. I'm interested in a few different things after my PhD, either working in Scicomm, science policy, or being a medical science liaison. And for all those things, you just need writing and communication skills. And sometimes when we're caught up in our little lab bubble, we don't have the opportunity to do that. Or when we do write as scientists, it's often to a journal or a review article where you're writing for an academic audience. So it is a really good idea if you're interested in really working in any type of science communication to practice writing about things in a context that anyone from any background can understand. So journals are not accessible. We use a lot of jargon. We use a lot of abbreviations, and they're really long and they're really not pleasant to read.
Oh, yeah.
So it's really interesting just trying to change your voice from that academic voice to a you know, a voice that's actually pleasurable to read and a lot more informal and a lot less jargony. But I enjoy it. So writing for Bolded Science is an opportunity to pretty much practice that type of writing instead of strictly academic, strict rules writing.
Yeah, that's absolutely
Yeah.
so important. And you're right, it's two completely different voices. When you're in your project and presenting for journal club and all of these things, it's
Mhm.
very jargony. And some departments are more jargony than the others, but my area, oh, we love acronyms. Everything's a DSM and ALQ. There's so many acronyms. But how do you tailor your voice to switch from that? Because we spend so much time being trained for that academic voice. How do you switch to make it more general?
To be frank, it was actually kind of hard at first. When you write in academic writings, even your sentence structures is boring because you say, since this happened, this is going to happen. And it's very like brick by brick writing. So typically when I go to write a post, I write as if I was talking, and my first draft will be really sloppy. You know, I'll have a lot of extra words in it too, because when we speak, we use a lot of kind of linker words in between that you don't really need. And I think that that helps me write a little bit more casual. Most of the posts that we have written on the site also haven't been super, super technical because we want to write posts that would be interesting to other people. So I'm not going to write about, you know, the binding affinity of proteins in this very specific pathway. Instead, I get to talk about more general topics of science,
Mhm.
which is really exciting to be able to do that because it, like, again, when we're in our lab bubbles, we're studying a very, very, very small piece of science. So it's good to participate in Scicomm and remember that there's like bigger stories going on. And science also gets tied in with people. So a lot of our posts sometimes might not necessarily be scientific, but about scientists. And that's always fun to write too.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you, from your, so Kerry has a website called BoldedScience that I will absolutely tag. So the features where you talk about either scientists that you mentioned or actual scientific topics, do you feel like there is any difference in how you approach those two features?
Um, I haven't written too many of the topics about scientists. We had one really good post about scientists during the quarantine. It was by Jeffrey Letourneau from Duke. Sorry, I'm looking over here because I'm looking at my website. I have two monitors. I'm not being rude and breaking eye
No,
contact.
no, absolutely not.
Um,
This is best.
and that was a really good post because he was writing about how scientists, you know, they love the lab so much and they were able to get really creative at home and somehow bring the lab to the house to them. So
I
that was interesting. Yeah, so he was writing about how or how some scientists, since they were home with their kids, they were finding activities to do at home with their children and so on and so forth. So that was a pretty good piece about people. Another thing we write about often too is about, you know, this culture of science and
Mm,
the academic culture of science. Hopefully how we can fix some of the broken areas of the culture. And those articles go over well. But even when we're talking about like human interest piece about sciences, we still try to bring in data and sources. So it's still similar in that context because even if we're doing like a interest piece, we still want it to be, you know, analytical
yeah.
and tied to data. So in a way, actually, the way we write both of those kinds of pieces about science or scientists, it ends up being pretty similar.
Okay, actually, you brought up something that I think is really important that I'd love to touch on. So, you mentioned the culture of science and the culture of this academic world, and that's a topic in and of itself. But if you could touch on it briefly to kind of say, you know, as someone who has gotten into scientific communication, you have a platform, you're seeing it from the inside. What do you think our biggest issue is that we need to fix, and how do you think Bolded Science fits into that and kind of fits a need? It's a two-part question, but
The biggest issue,
yeah, we have a lot to work with, but
yes, because there's a few that are coming up right now. I would probably think from my background as first generation and a lot of the information that's out there about racism in science and academia and sexism in science and academia, I think we have an accessibility issue of getting into the field.
Mm.
There is a pretty high wall to climb to get to higher education. And a lot of that requires us working for free, like finding an internship,
Mhm.
networking, really getting that first lab experience makes all the difference in the world. And I know colleagues of mine who really had an issue finding that first lab experience and have, majors in biology and are not working in labs right now, even though that was initially their plan.
Mm.
So I think doing a lot of STEM education outreach is important. And that's something else I do at UConn. Just a sidebar here. I also work with Young Explorers in Science, which is headed by Gabby Valles. And if you want to talk to her about that in the future, I think that's something that your platform would be interested in. And we're actually working to kind of get high school students from different backgrounds experience with science sooner.
Mm-hmm.
Because I honestly think that we need to make sure that we are recruiting the best minds for science and not just the people who have a friend of a friend who is a scientist who can reach out their hand and give them that first lab opportunity. It shouldn't be nepotism and networking. We should be a meritocracy. And unfortunately, I think because it's so hard to get that first experience, it's really hard to do that.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, you touched on, I like that. Should not be nepotism and networking.
Yeah.
That might be a good title right there for something. Yeah.
Right.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because I saw that on your site, and since it was a little outside of the purview of this interview, I was just going to
Yeah.
ask you about it. But that is amazing. That's definitely something that needs to be done. And it's funny that you mentioned it because that's a small well, I shouldn't say small. It's a developing passion project of mine that I knew when I got into grad school. I wanted to be able to reach back to those people who didn't have the same opportunities that I've had, because I know I'm one of the privileged few as a woman of color, who I always knew that I was going to college. Grad school was not oh, you're going to do that? Well, we don't know how to support you or what it's going to be like, because there are
Right.
people in my
Yeah.
family who have been there. But so few people have that and have that background, have that support system. And it's really hard to be the first. And so for those people who are trying to be the first, we absolutely need to reach back and give them a leg up. So I'm
Right.
so glad that you have that platform. What do you think has been your biggest challenge with BoldedScience?
To be frank, starting it off has gone pretty easy. I think anyone who is starting a platform, it's difficult to get like the followers at first, because that was one of my concerns about writing a blog, was that nobody was going to read it. And I think that that's probably everybody thinks about that who wants to start a blog, like who wants to listen to this one random person at UConn, which is why I have a collaborative blog too, because it's not just my opinions on the site.
Mm-hmm.
So I think at first I spent a lot of time not even writing, but just trying to get some Twitter followers. So when I did post a post, people would actually click on the link. And it took me a little bit to figure out the nuance of Twitter. And for those of you who don't know, academic Twitter is a really big community. And so is science Twitter, which is a subset in academic Twitter. So if you're interested in getting your own platform or networking, people even post postdoc positions and stuff like that on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good idea to get an account, really feel it out, and just use the right hashtags. Once I started using the right hashtags, that was all the difference in the world. So hashtag academic chatter, hashtag PhD chat, and hashtag Scicomm.
Yeah.
Those 3 ones
Yes.
are how you amplify your voice. So
Yes.
that's my advice number 1. And then number 2, just don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Like, follow people that you don't know. That's fine. It's not like Facebook where you should know them before you friend them. Like, just anyone who's saying cool things or just work in a field that you're interested in, or maybe there's a PI whose research you like that you could see them yourself working through in the future. Like, just follow all those people and you're likely to get follow backs. So once I figured out those Twitter nuances, then my platform was there. And then I was able to recruit people to write for me, and I was able to write. And people actually would read what I say.
Oh, awesome. Yes, the power of the hashtag. I feel like that's probably I'm going to title that one of the next videos under that, the power of the hashtag, because you said it, that is all the difference between you posting something and it just being out there floating in cyberspace and people following it. There are so many academic
Oh,
chatter.
totally. Yeah.
Those are like the creme de la creme of hashtags on Twitter. So we want strong hashtags, know the right hashtags, be yourself, be willing to follow somebody that you don't know just to start building those connections, because you never know where it will go. And
Right.
the next part of that I want to ask you, how do you make, because this Twitter and even just working online with Google and having your website pop up, there's algorithms attached, but particularly for Twitter, how have you learned to kind of make the algorithm work for you?
Definitely those hashtags to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I would just say, like, don't get discouraged. I would say two things about that. One, don't get discouraged. Sometimes you're going to tweet something out and no one's going to see it or no one's going to care. And that's fine. My biggest recommendation is, like, don't put out there what you just think people want to hear. So sometimes you'll be on Twitter and you'll see people all tweeting about the same thing. I don't know, like accessibility, for example. And by accessibility, I mean like the accessibility of content in science. And then you'll see all these people saying the same things. Don't feel the need to go off there and say the same thing because you just think you're going to get likes. Like, put out content that is good content and is your opinion and you're sticking to. You know, brand yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, don't just do things because you want followers. Like, brand yourself, put out the content that you believe in, and hopefully followers will follow. And as for like the algorithm, I don't know if I'm like hitting the algorithm or if I just have good followers. You know, it's difficult to say.
But that's a good point too. Having the type of followers that you need will probably make a big impact. So that
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah. But I would just say definitely, I was speaking with someone else who wrote for my site who was getting involved in Scicomm, and she was having a hard time building followers because she wants to do Scicomm like on her own when she graduates, so almost like start up her own company, so she needs followers. But I feel like she was just saying things that she thought would garner a response. And I feel like that's a really short-term solution. Like, you should just, you know, say what you want to say.
Yeah.
Talk about what interests you, not about what you think people will like.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
to anybody listening who might be interested in Scicomm, you never know. That idea that seems so, oh, no one will like it, no one will care, nobody wants to hear just me, this random person at UConn, and you never know how it can develop. You can have a huge following, and that idea that you have that seems so small or so insignificant, it could be the one thing that nobody else thought of. The biggest power that you have, you are the only one that is you, and that is your biggest power. And so if you have an idea, pursue it, see what happens from it. The worst that can happen is it won't work out, and then it'll be a learning experience. But to Kerry, so this BoldedScience platform, how do you think the experience, like how do you write this on your CV? Where do you kind of fit this in so that you want to be in Scicomm or a MSL, medical science liaison, or in science writing?
So I have a section on my CV as of now. And before I graduate, I'll probably go to like career services and have them check it out too, because it's always good to have people look at it. But what I have is a section that says mentorship, outreach, and communication. So it's kind of like I group that together with any mentorship opportunities that I've done, or you know, the blog or the YES program, that all goes in that scenario. Yeah, because
mentorship and outreach, but throwing communication in there, it's under that umbrella. I like that.
Yeah, exactly. Because, and in some situations too, like STEM education outreach and or just doing mentorship, that kind of overlaps with communication. Because if you're teaching, you're communicating. Or especially like when we teach and we go to the high schools, we gotta drop down our language and like our, you know, academic talk and make it accessible. So that definitely like co-aligns with communication.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, yeah. And one of the biggest, I think, things to translate to your CV, one of the skills that everyone kind of is looking for, and most PhDs don't realize that we have, is we have so many translatable skills just by going into the lab every day and writing for grants or preparing journal clubs or whatever it is. So you saying that me teaching, I wouldn't just put on my CV, oh, that I'm teaching and I taught somewhere, but you're including, oh, I mentored, I tailored my language, I was able to present, you have public speaking skills and and making things more accessible. This isn't a talk on making things look good on your CV, but our point is to use your resources as best possible and make things work for you. So I think that's glad that we mentioned that. Do you think there are any particular do's and don'ts that you'd say if you're getting into Scicomm to avoid or strive for?
Not necessarily. I'm trying to think. It's difficult because I believe that like everybody getting involved in science communication or science writing, you have your own voice. So I don't want to put like blanketed rules on it. I would just say like, do you get involved in social media even if you're skeptical? Because I was skeptical at first because I'm not much of a Instagram or Facebook person in my personal life. But it was interesting to see the academic community on Twitter. So I would just say, you know, like don't discount and science person, you think if social media is beneath you, like it's not. You know, we're scientists are people and we want to connect with one another.
Okay.
Oh, can you hear me? I think you're frozen.
Oh yeah, it went out for a brief second, but I think I caught the beginning and end of your sentence. So to make sure I got the context of what you're saying is that not discounting anything that you have to say as going to be a negative. Is that right?
Right. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Cool. And I guess the last overarching thing that I would definitely want to give you the opportunity to share is if you could ask yourself one thing, if you could tell yourself one thing back when you started this, what would that be? What have you learned that you think is the most valuable thing that you could tell yourself from back when you started?
Most valuable thing. I'm not sure. I don't know if I would tell myself anything, so then I don't know if that would ruin the learning process for me.
That is a wise answer. People are like, go back to your 20-something self, what would you say? And it's like, just be patient, or, you know, it's always something in general because you don't want to ruin your learning opportunities. That's wisdom. Hey, that's good.
But just I think like the most valuable thing I've learned from just like doing the writing process and the science communication. I don't know. That's a difficult question.
And that's okay too, for that to be a difficult question, because at the end of the day, you are still learning and you're in grad school and this, I should ask, so how much of your time, how do you divide your time? I should ask that.
So it's been a lot easier dividing up my time because of coronavirus. And that's actually when we put out like the most posts and got like the most feedback and stuff. So I think it helps that, I edit the posts that are coming in. So anyone who writes with me, I do a little bit of a back and forth with them. But you know, that's not as time consuming as writing your own post. I only write my own post about once a month or so. Because it is very time consuming. So having the collaborative blog helps, because I think there are very few scientists who would be able to keep a blog up on their own and post good content every week, especially because, you know, it seems like some of these posts don't take a lot of time to write because they're only a few paragraphs, but there's research behind them. And sometimes there's more research than we even put on the actual post itself because we try to keep them kind of short. So I do mostly do it in my spare time, away from lab, but I enjoy it. So it hasn't been hard to make the time for it. I would probably say it's only like a few hours a week that I put into actually blogging. Okay. You know, I do scroll through Twitter quite a bit, but don't we all? That takes up a lot of time, but I'm not including interacting with people on Twitter with that.
Yeah, which is important, but yeah, I think that's the more time consuming part, at least for me. I haven't gotten into the active phase of most of my things yet. This is the first actual recording that I'm doing, but just PhD posted this. Oh, Academic Chatter retweeted this. Bolded
Right.
Science retweeted this. And I'm like, ooh, what is that about? And scrolling, it's like, oh man, well, there goes an hour. I don't know how we got here, but here we are. But that's really exciting. And thank you so much for sharing today, Kerry. I love that your platform really gives a voice to grad students and serves the dual purpose of Scicomm, which is to put information out there for a general audience to receive and be informed about. And it gives grad students and people of all scientific stages, whether they're research techs or grad students or whoever, an opportunity to pad their CV and start to get that exposure. So thank you so much for making this platform and spending the time to do a video with us today.
You're
So
welcome.
thank you. So to anyone watching, the website that you will want to check out is www.boldedscience.com. Very simple. Twitter @BoldedScience. And hey, if you're interested in scientific communication or you think this might be something that could have some good skills for you in the future, check it out, get involved, and you never know where it'll lead.
Mhm.
All right, so thank you everyone for listening and hope you have a great day.